So here we are. We have Anne Laure Jackson as ever. Hello, Anne.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be listening from.
Yes, well, it's exciting because my drive time show is Montana's breakfast show. So,
Go on, Montana.
also Vancouver in Canada, same time zone as Montana. There you go.
Good morning.
So, sensory stuff. Let's have a quick review of where we've come to so far. So we've looked at the fact that there's 5 senses that we are all more familiar with. That would be, let's see if I can get this right. So you've got sight, touch, taste, hearing, and the 5th one, which I always forget, which would be, no, it's gone, hearing.
Well,
there you go.
Is it?
I don't know. And then there's 2 more, which I'm not even going to try and get right. And then there's an 8th group.
Yeah.
So that's been a journey of discovery. And one of the things I think we've learned, and certainly the comments and questions that have come in, is how much people are enjoying learning about something which perhaps is really basic in our minds. And yet, I think you've said it several times, it's as basic as you can access it intellectually, but it can be as deep as you can go as well. And there's so much to sensory things. So people are loving this. I love sitting here with the interview going and watching the comments come in of, this is great. So it's wonderful. Right, let's start with a little comment then. Anne and Andy never fail to deliver an informative half an hour. I am delighted with all that I am learning.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, that's Mary in Montana again. Loving what's going on. So have you been learning anything specific recently? I know one of the weeks you says, oh, I've learned about babies in the womb and all that. Do you have a weekly learning thing that you do to stay in touch with what's going on?
I would like to. I really would like to. What was I doing? I was learning more because there's the massive part with trauma, and that's always a biggie, because the last part of my sensory super system is about looking, once people have learned about sensory issues and learned how to assess it, learn how to treat it, learn how to manage it, because it's really powerful and effective. When it doesn't work, it's like, well, we probably are not looking at a sensory route. So the question is then, well, if it's not sensory, what is it? Is it a behavior? Is it a heart issue? Whereas if you're coming from the Christian faith, then we're dealing with sin and our human default position. Or we're looking at trauma, we're looking at, it's like trying to discern what else is going on. So I'm trying to, because I'm going to re-record, as I keep on doing every now and again, I go back and refresh the courses and make sure they're as up to date as they possibly can be. So yeah, it's just been learning more about anxiety and more how within the scope of autism, why anxiety is even more traumatic and anxiety producing than even typical anxiety, which is like our arousal levels from a sensory perspective, how we describe it in the body, because of the way that the brain is processing sensations, that it really causes anxiety. But there was an extra element to what I was learning about that this week, and I'm just trying to think, can I actually put it out to you again what it is? So if you give me a few moments, I'll see. Like it's something about being able to anticipate what's coming up next, and that is what causes the anxiety, and that is within those who have more of that. We just might class more of the autistic brain, the way that the autistic brain works more. It's the difficulty in anticipating what is coming ahead, and therefore to be able to plan and to be able to relax into what they anticipate. And therefore that's why we have to make it really, really clear what is coming up in the future, because of that difficulty in anticipating and therefore preparing themselves for what might come ahead. And therefore their behaviors can sometimes seem more controlling, just because it's a very unsafe place to be, because they can't predict. Some people can't predict, others obviously can, regardless of diagnosis, but it is the difficulty with that prediction, because as humans we're incredibly unpredictable. The pitch that we speak at changes. Our smell can change, whether we put something on or depending what activity we've been involved in. We move really spontaneously. It's not like a safe cup that's on a table. That's not going to move, but humans move, and they might come and, come close to you without you expecting it. They might make noises, they might blow, So humans are very, very unpredictable, which is very unsafe and very threatening for some people. That's why some people prefer to be more on their own, or they're very happy behind a computer, because a computer, it's hard, it's flat, it does what it tells you. It is very consistent and predictable. So that was my little learning. If I know you're going to ask me that, then I'll prepare next time. But yeah, it was about how unpredictable we are and how certain brains find it really hard to plan ahead because of the unpredictability of life, and especially humanity. We are very unpredictable beings.
Okay, well, some of the foundation of that I can understand, and then perhaps we can delve a bit deeper, because when I went to London for the first time, getting the tube, getting the train, I found it very stressful because I had no clue what I was doing. I had postcodes. I knew roughly where I needed to be, roughly when I was hoping to be there. But, at a simple foundational level, I did everything I could. So my host, I said to Johnny, my host, what do I do? He says, all you got to do is walk to the station, tap the Oyster card thingy with your debit card, get on the train, and make sure you tap on the way out. That covers the payment. And he went through some of the stuff that I was struggling with, but tried to prepare me. But there's still that anxiety of, what if I get on the wrong train? What if I get on the wrong tube? What if I go the wrong way? Then there's all the people everywhere, because it's just relentless people. So I think the foundation element of what you've been saying that we can all grasp is, when you don't have an understanding of what is coming, it can make you quite anxious. If you've got to meet people, that then grows. I had to meet somebody at a certain point. All of a sudden, I'm not just going from A to B. Now I'm going from A to B with a purpose for a time. That then grows the anxiety. I got extremely hot on the tube. So I came off and I was struggling to speak because now my mouth is dry because I'm really thirsty. So that I think is the basic bit that I think we can all grasp that part. But we're not talking about that, are we? It's much more than that, isn't it?
That is the foundation. I think that is a good starting point, because we can all relate to that. And that's what we need in order to be able to see it's that times 10. For some, it's that times 70. Like the intensity of the anxiety, the intensity of the unknown, because of the difficulties in having that flexibility of thought to think, oh crumbs, if I get on the train the wrong way, we're thinking, right, okay, we'll get off here, we'll cross over the other side, we can come back, we'll just need to check the train times. We are processing all of that at the same time within a certain amount of stress and those arousal levels that we can cope with. But when you can't trust that your brain can be that flexible or can process things at that speed, there can be an element of just shutdown. And it's like, if it doesn't go to plan, I genuinely am stuck. I am lost. And there are people who will be very, very, very fearful, very anxious of doing certain things, or will just about cope to get somewhere if everything works out well, and then they will collapse when they get there, and they will need a good amount of time to recover, for sure. Actually, a sensory hangover is a fairly new term that is kind of like coming out, and it's almost as if, because we have these levels, and within the courses that I work with, I help people understand about levels of self-regulation, which is part of this levels of anxiety, part of these regulation levels, where I talk about levels like 1 and 2. They're these lovely calm, alert states. So us chatting, it's lovely. I'm nice and calm. I know we're going out, but it's lovely. We're just having a conversation. So I would say I'm at level 1 at the minute. If we were going to go and have a game of tennis, we would probably, not with your sore foot, but we would head up to like a level 2, and we would be a bit more active, but we would still be happy and we would be focused. You go into a level 3, or if we were to get a bit too giddy, or something else happened, or there was a fire down the road, or for us in typical neurology terms, it would need to be something quite significant to tip us into a 3, which is like getting, quite anxious. A 4 is when folks head down into that meltdown, where it all just becomes too much. The anxiety, they're way overwhelmed, they're way too hot. It's not a happy place. A 4, and then a 5 is like a shutdown, where it is just, I can't cope. And that literally is where you'd find someone on the train platform and they're just sitting there because they have no capacity to think. Their whole brain has just gone, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So coming out of that, that's what is sometimes termed as a sensory hangover, because there is this sense of just my whole body is wasted. I have just been flooded with all these neurochemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, and the body is needing time to recover. And there are days, even if we're coming up to Christmas, fireworks, bonfire night, all of that could have set things off. Christmas is massively sensory overloading for some, so we really need to plan in times of rest and recuperation to allow our parasympathetic nervous system to help us to rest and to recover, and get the body into as good a place as possible, so we don't tip into those 4 and those 5s, and we don't need the rest and recovery that as much to help us function.
Okay. I'm just using myself as a subject to try and help us understand this. I got to a point of, so I was up at 5:45. I drove down to London. This is all fine. I'm comfortable in a car. Got to my friend. He takes me to the train station. I get on the train, get into London. I go and meet someone. I'm starting to get a bit tense, but and this is me trying to understand this. I'm sort of able to manage and process some of these things, but by about 6:30 in the evening, I'd hit a point where I couldn't do anything. I bought some food. I stood in the quietest corner I could, and I just had to reboot. But the thing is, it took me maybe 20 minutes, and I was back. I was good. Off I went again. But what we're talking about with these sensory issues, autism, for example, is I had that like once within a day, and I recovered fairly quickly with a bit of food.
Yeah.
But we're talking about this maybe a few minutes and they're there, and then without the ability to process, then the next one comes, and it's like I had once in one day, but this is relentless, isn't it?
It is relentless. Yeah, utterly relentless. And that's where a lot of where I want to try and get into working with children is because over years of having this, we often see those that I work with then in the mental health arena in those late teens and those early 20s. Where it's just they've really held it together through school. That it's just been impact on their sensory systems the whole time. Them thinking, I'll work it out. They don't realize the impact that it's actually having on them, and the brain just goes like fair. It just gets to a point of literal burnout, shutdown, or just had enough. And there can be years of recuperation after that for some, if it gets to that point. But yeah, so that's why it's really important to take care of our sensory health on a regular basis, because for some, again, going back, if they're going to school, they hold it together, they mask, schools think they're coping absolutely fine, but they go home and all hell breaks out, literally. It's not I deal with the parents at the end of the school day. So even just after one day, there's an awful lot of stuff that can happen. So we want to be getting into every single minute of every single day to try and get the best activities to reduce the overwhelm on their senses, but also to put in good sensory experiences to help them to modulate, to help them to calm, to help them to stay in this calm, alert state, in this good place for as much as possible throughout the day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and extend those days as long as possible, so we don't get burnout in those late teens, early 20s. Or for adults, some of them it's kind of like part and parcel sometimes of the midlife crisis, because again, they've held things together for such a long period of time, and then it's like, actually, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And they can't, because physically they're exhausted.
We can come back to that one. Yeah. Okay. No, midlife crisis. That's an interesting one, because we're talking about the idea in my head was, and I'm not making light of this in any way, but the game Buckaroo, where it's the game you put the thing on the back of the donkey, and eventually it's gonna flick its legs up, and you lose the game. But that to me feels a little bit like a simplistic version of what you're saying, because at some point the load can be added, and eventually there's going to be a tipping point, the straw that breaks the camel back, or
Absolutely.
the Buckaroo thing. Are there ways, before we get back to the midlife crisis thing, are there ways of seeing this in somebody that we could recognize? You're saying that schools can I suppose, see because we can cover well, can't we? We can get very good. Are there things that we could see in children or in adults that we can think, are you okay? Because there's something we can that's tangible that we can, I suppose, a set of symptoms, I think you said before.
Yeah, I think some of the basics. Sleep is a good one. It's an important one because it tells us about where the arousal levels are at the end of the day. In order, we have to be able to bring our nervous system down in order for sleep to happen. So there's a lot of things that if folks aren't able to go to sleep well, and there's lots of different reasons for that, one of them is sensory. So it's kind of like if sleep is affected or has never been good, then we need to look and do a full assessment and find out what's going on in the senses, do some treatment techniques so that we can bring arousal levels down so that they can then go to sleep. Because there's no way that if somebody is pretty highly stressed neurophysiologically, that, sleep happens down here and they're up here. So it's just not going to happen. So that's where we want to try and be calming people down, calming their nervous systems down, getting them more organized and regulated so that the brain can switch off well enough for sleep. And that's a big topic to be able to go into. Eating, appetite might be affected. If they're quick, one of the biggest things is that when we know that they can go from 0 to 100 at a split second, and they think, where did that come from? So explosive behavior, that would also be a trigger for me to think, I think their systems that are setting, their default is pretty high. So it doesn't take much to tip them over and for them to lose control. So, so sleep and certainly those behaviors where they're very quick off the mark. And also, but the other side, if they are shattered and they are sleeping an awful lot. So you have both extremes, because some are that exhausted that they will just literally come home from school and they just need to sleep. Block everything else off, or they're just exhausted, and that's what they do.
Okay, so that if we're seeing somebody who we would assume has a good normal general health, but all of a sudden we see them having really bad sleep or too much sleep, or their appetite changes quite dramatically, or perhaps what's the third thing you said that's gone up my head already? 100 mile an hour instant reaction to stuff. Those are the kind of things that we might be thinking, maybe there's overload here.
Yeah. And some of those things that if you're parents, your children might always have done that. And you're just thinking, maybe they'll just mature out of it. They'll just grow out of it. And if they are not, around like 2 to 3, I mean, those toddlers are tricky, and they're just not designed. It's just not their place to be regulated and so on. But if you're still having that, going through those primary years in particular, it's like, well, I think there's more going on, because they should start to regulate, especially by the age of 7. They should be a lot more together. But even like 3, 4, 5-year-olds, it's I would go with your gut reaction if you're a parent or a grandparent, and that's it that I work with the grandparents too, because they can often see things, and they're a bit more tuned in, and sometimes the parents are too busy, they're working or this, that and the other, but actually the grandparents can see it, and we have a service for grandparents too, to be able to support their families if they like that.
Because they're one step removed, they're going to get a different perspective, aren't they?
Yeah. And they can work on things. Sometimes it's really overwhelming and overpowering as a parent when you consider everything that you've got to do. And there are some parents who just don't have the capacity. But with a bit of help from, mum and dad or any other grandparent or aunties or uncles, then we can just, teamwork. It's really important.
Right. Midlife crisis, you said, could be a sign of someone who's held it together for a very long time. They hit an age, and then it sort of starts to fall apart. Do you want to expound that one? Because that's really interesting to me.
It's a combination of coming to terms with who people are and how they are. Again, midlife crises, they're massively complex. There's lots of things coming in from different areas. But from a sensory perspective, it is like they, from a young age, or depending what mum and dad have said or what teachers have said about them, and they think they ought to behave a certain way and do a certain thing. As people get more familiar, loads of adults are now being diagnosed with this, that, and the other, quite rightly in some respects. And it's a real affirmation that they're not, they've struggled in certain areas because of differences, the way that their brains have been. So it's partly the fact that people are really looking and finding and realizing that they're different, and people choose, no, but people don't necessarily choose, people react to what they have been told in different ways. For some people, it is a massive relief to think, we just had some removals around this week, and the guy said there, he's in his 50s, and he said, I think I'm autistic. So we had a little bit of a chat, and I said, well, now that I know that, thank you, because this is what I need to do. So I spoke to him in a different way because I thought, this will really help you. And he said, yeah, this will really help me. So having a diagnosis can be really helpful, because all of a sudden it's just like, well, because I was going to say, oh, you could do better. I was a lot more relaxed and a lot more, we've got a bit of this and we've got a bit of that. But knowing the way that his brain, as we talked it through, how his brain worked, it was like, okay, I need to be a lot more specific, and I can be. And now that I know that you would appreciate that, I will be a lot more directive for you. But where was I going with that? Yes, I think because of the numbers of people hitting a certain age and stage and recognizing that actually what they've been told and what they thought they should be, who they thought they should be, how they thought they should be, actually isn't them and isn't authentic, isn't real. And they are finding a freedom in being able to say, actually, I really don't like that. I need that turned down. I need my personal space. I need to be going to the gym every single day. I need, that there's an awakening of an awareness, which is a really positive thing. Part of the negative side of it, the crisis part of it, is the fact that people think, I can't believe I've just lived like this for so long, and I never did anything about it. And it's until people get to the point where they have the strength to move through it and to face things, then they can turn in on themselves, because of thinking that I can't do it. I don't know how to get through this, and I don't know where to go to allow me to be me. Yeah, that's definitely one side of it anyway.
I was just thinking about taste specifically. So that, for example, for a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old child, sprouts, broccoli can be very, very strong in flavour.
Yeah.
So when we think, why won't you eat your veg? Well, it could be that it's too much. As a child, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I could even consider something like a sprout, because it was so strong, and my palate's quite weak or something. I would basically want to be sick. I still don't like them, but up to that point, I probably would have been sick. But I was thinking about that, just one simple thing of taste for a child. So, like an older person could eat a curry easier than a younger person, because the taste has been used. So it's it's a little bit less sensitive as you get older, and it sort of gets a bit less fresh. So that's just one tiny example in my mind of how just eating a piece of broccoli can change from the age of 5 to the age of 50. Yeah. When we factor in every other single sense, now all of a sudden it's like, how much broccoli was in that mouth and how strong was it? But every sense.
Every sense, yeah. Everything that you eat, everything that you smell, everything that you touch. Because when we were just going over in coaching this week with some of my members, and we were going over what we call their sensory thumbprint, which is how we bring and look together. And there are some of our individuals where every single sense is overreactive. Every sight, every smell, every touch, their movement senses, just even going up and down escalators, going up, they just can't manage so many things. Life is massively overwhelming for them, and that is day in, day out. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done to try and help treat their systems, but then also absolutely have a good, strong handle on their environments, so that they are not utterly bombarded and will eventually burn out with it all.
Which makes me think about your typical male midlife crisis is a bloke who goes out and buys a motorbike, buys all the leathers, and suddenly becomes a biker. And I'm just thinking again to that broccoli idea that actually some of those senses have changed over time. Aside from anything else that's gone in life, whether it is overload or whatever, all of a sudden they want something different. And actually, it may not be a crisis. It may just be that actually their body is ready for something else. So it isn't necessarily indicative of this is a really bad situation. Oh, it's a mental health crisis. I want to get a motorbike. Actually, it could just be, well, your senses have changed and you want something new, you know?
And that'd be really interesting. And actually, the likes of speed, like I know what it's funny, the motorbike thing is often that like a typical thing, but when you look at it from a sensory perspective, what you get, it's phenomenal. Because you have this really tight pressure, and that there are lots of the light touch is really dysregulating for lots of people. So if you have strong leathers on, if they are tight around you as well, and especially if you're sitting, your body awareness is like 100% better because you've got all this kit on you, and it can be fairly heavy depending on which it is, I'm sure, but like literally that vestibular, that speed going through space, and you've got this auditory, it's a very affirming body thing because you have these deep vibrations. Like the sound is phenomenal, and especially if you're behind another bike as well, and you've got camaraderie, you've got that social aspect, and the biking is a massive sensory experience, a positive for most as well.
Yeah, I took my license years ago, but I always remembered, I don't have a bike anymore, but when I put my helmet on, there was this moment of calm and peace because it basically drowns out everything. But I always had earplugs as well because it's so noisy. And all of a sudden, and this is where I wanted to go. When you take out one of the senses like sound, which effectively you do with an earplug, is that something that can then help people to deal with other senses? Would that be a normal treatment route to remove something to work on others?
Yes. Mono processing is definitely, depending who we are and how we are, it's like one channel at a time. So yeah, you would cut out. Some need multi. We talk about lots of multi-sensory stuff, and nurseries in particular. We've got the shaving foam, we're making lettuce, and it's a big body, and it's all that kind of stuff happening. And there are some people who need that mono processing. Literally, it is only stuff going through the eyes, or it is only one thing, the smell, or eyes closed, auditory. So definitely a treatment technique is removing or adding certain senses so that the brain can process on that one thing. But that calming, that's a beautiful thing.
It was.
Yeah.
It's funny. Just a slight aside, but we lived in one house. I had a very nice bike, and I had a road legal sports exhaust, so it was completely legal, but it was a bit more throaty. And my neighbours came out to me one day because I used to be a trucker, so I was getting up at 3-4 o'clock, and I was always conscious. I'd try and aim the exhaust away from the garage so it wouldn't go bouncing anywhere. But my neighbours came and said, "Oh, we heard you bike every morning," and I'm thinking, "Oh no!" They said, "No, it just reminded us because we're bikers. We haven't been for ages." But it reminded my husband and I of all the good times being on a bike, just hearing your exhaust starting in the morning. And there was these smiles on their face. And they then started all because of the sound of an exhaust. And it comes back to the power of just one sense and what it can trigger. Yeah, sorry. Just a ping a little memory there. Hey, we've done all sorts today again. I love we just bounce. It's brilliant. So we've touched on midlife crisis, motorbikes, and exhausts. That was me. Overwhelmed and trying to use, I suppose, me as a test subject of this is something that we can all go through, but we're not talking about this a little bit more, which brings us back to one of our first questions from someone who had a brain trauma. Oh, yes, I get forgetful. We're not saying, it's sort of the same. It's just I had the idea of helping us to understand some part of what somebody with autism, for example, would go through, because it took me 12 hours to reach that and I was good again in 10 minutes, but that they can have that and it's not that quick response, is it? I mean, 20 minutes felt like a lifetime for me at 20 minutes, but I had some dinner, it was dinner time, it was all good.
That's right.
So
Yeah. Yes, the regulation techniques that we do, I mean, it is all about helping them trying to get back and regulated as quickly as possible. Because,
Yeah.
for most of us, we can regroup fairly quickly, but some people take days. And so it's just like, how can we shorten that? And we do. And that's the lovely testimonies that we get back. It's just like they've sprung back much, much quicker than they used to. And it's just like, yes, hallelujah. It's good.
But coming back to what you said right at the beginning about it's that being prepared for what's coming, and some of us don't have the ability to prepare as well. So even with the guys you got in for your removal firm, just talking to him differently, it may be a little bit strange to us at first to think, well, I don't naturally talk this way, but actually we're then helping another human being, which that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, because the other thing about that was he was also asking, should I tell people or should I have a diagnosis? And I thought, to be honest, you telling me the fact that you think you're on the spectrum is massively helpful. And actually, if you were to say if you are going to removals, that if you had this, and this information about this room, this furniture, this, all the details of where, how, when, we could really help you as a removals company if you tell us what you need to know. So it could really help open up conversation. I think the more we know about ourselves, the more, and if we're not afraid of telling people, which is some people, I think we're getting there as a culture generally, we're getting much more compassionate and just understanding and recognizing that just people are different. So, but yeah, if we know how we work best, if we can tell other people, look, I can serve you better if you give me this information like this in a way that I can understand and that helps my brain, then I can serve you better. So
that's a good place to end, I think. We can help each other, can't we? In simple ways.
Yeah.
Understanding and listening is one of those. Thank you as ever. I love these. They're great. I love the comments that come in. It's brilliant. Give us your website again for people to find out how they can get hold of you.
It's AnneLaureJackson.com. Shall I spell it out this time for those? I know it's a funny old name. ANNELAURE. Anybody who's French will know that. Anne-Laure. Anne-Laure Jackson, Jackson. Just a good old British surname there. So, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. AnneLaureJackson.com. Yes, and we'll be back again next week for more, all things being the same. Send your questions if you've got anything for Anne to answer, from midlife crisis to truck design. Babies in the womb. Hey, we're covering all topics. If you've got questions or comments, feel free to send them to me and I will ask them to Anne and she'll answer them for you on air. Hello at pure247radio.org. Hello at pure247radio.org. And it can be as anonymous as you desire, as it often is. Thank you, Anne.
That's great. See you next time.
God bless. Take care.